Hey yo. Um, so I'm gonna talk about development and sabotage. Let's start with development. I'm gonna give the definition first, just so I know kind of what I'm trying to say, and make sure that it's rooted in something firm, what have you. But anyways, so definition of development is the process of developing or moving gradually towards a more advanced state. Cool. Now, having said that, I'm going to talk about personal development and things like that, right? Now, sabotage. So, definition of sabotage is to deliberately destroy, damage, or obstruct something. Okay, cool. Why those two things? Well, because they go hand in hand oftentimes in life, from my personal experiences and observations. Because all of us, well, hopefully all of us, to some extent want to develop ourselves, right? We want to move towards a more advanced state, right? Naturally. All right, great. However, there's a lot of sabotage that happens. Um, However, one of the sabotages I specifically want to talk about though is self sabotage, because there's a lot of that. And so, in the definition, to deliberately destroy, damage, or obstruct something, I'm going to focus more on the word obstruct because I think that aligns better with self sabotage. Okay, cool. So, progression, advancing towards a or moving towards a more advanced state. We all want that, right? We all want to be more. We all want to be better. We all want to, you know, be better off than what we are. Why wouldn't we want that? That's just kind of natural. And I think that's a great thing, you know. But I guess one of the things that bothers me, I guess, is how. Let me clarify this first of all. Actually, we're all different as individuals, naturally, obviously. So I want to clarify that I am aware that there are some people that, for whatever reason may be, simply don't want a whole lot more of advanced movement towards or don't want a whole lot of movement towards a more advanced state. Now, we all do to some extent, right? But there are some people that don't really desire a whole lot comparatively to others, and that's okay. That is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Because again, the definition of moving towards a more advanced state doesn't just mean there isn't any specifics to it. It can just be, being more happy with oneself, spiritually or emotionally or what have you, or with others around them, family, friends, what have you, right? Um, so I'm just saying that just because I don't want this to be about like if you don't have more than what you have, then you should want that, because that's not. I don't think that's appropriate. But I do think it's appropriate for us to all desire throughout the entirety of our life to be more, to work towards having or being or what have you more than what we were, right? Okay, cool. Now, the reason I said I want to talk about that and sabotage, and I mentioned that they kind of go hand in hand from my observations and personal experience, is because if you do want more than what you have and you plan towards it and you set up, you know systems or protocols, what have you, right? I've noticed that it's very common for us to self sabotage those goals. Um, I'm victim to that, by the way, and there's varying levels to that too. So, for example, let's say health wise, you no longer want to eat sugar. Let's just say that's very simple, very basic, what have you, right? Okay, well, let's just say one day you just say, you know what, whatever, for whatever the reason may be, um, but you eat sugar. Well, here's the thing that I'm trying to express when it comes to self sabotage, though. Like, one thing is, deciding I'm gonna eat sugar once, right? But another thing is allowing that to linger on, because Okay, I'll use a very specific video games. Everybody knows what they are. Everybody has played video games to some extent, and I used to be addicted to video games. I played a lot. I actually would jokingly say that if I never went to college, I would probably be a very rich streamer right now. Now, I'm glad I went to college, and I'm honestly glad that I'm not a very rich streamer, because if I were, I probably would not be a great person, in all honesty, right? But nonetheless, so video games. The reason I'm mentioning that is because, like, to me, if you are somebody who, like, desires to be more, and is doing things to move towards that, I have a lot of there's a lot of people, there's a lot of people in my life, but just in general, there's a lot of people who play a lot of video games, and I question that if you are somebody who wants more, right? Because, like, what I'll often see is people will set some type of goal. It can be health, it can be strength, fitness, it can be doing a task that is aligned with whatever it is that you want to be, what have you. And video games have become some type of, like, um I suppose, a way out of, like, stressors, right? Because when you play video games, there's, well, I'm not gonna say there's not stress, because there is stress if you're losing a game, right? But it's a way to just kind of step out of whatever you've got going on, right? But here's the thing about video games, though, that I mean, I've concluded on, and I guess it can be argued on, but video games, from my view, is a type of self-sabotage. Why? Because it doesn't do anything for, like, it doesn't move you towards your goals, right? If you want to make the argument it does something for you, it distracts you and helps you, do this and that, whatever, fine, fine. That's cool. But too many people, I feel, and again, uh, you know, to each their own, right? But too many people allow something like video games to hinder them and hinder their progression, right? And so I'll tell a story of a conversation. And sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. I didn't really know where to take this conversation because I I'm still putting it together, I guess. Um Recently I had a conversation with somebody, and they were expressing how they have concerns and frustrations towards their kids. Um Two boys. And they're I'm being very vague here, on purpose. But they're two boys. This person argues that they're not doing a whole lot, and not necessarily with their life, but I'm just gonna say it that way, with their life. But again, that's not how it was specifically said. But they spend, you know most of their time they do playing video games. They don't go out a lot. They don't have a whole lot of social life. Work wise, that's not really there's not much of that either. So this parent naturally has that's concerning to them. Okay, fair enough. Now, I thought two things, and I kind of expressed it to this parent. And one of them was, okay, well, firstly, I told them, the parent, that they should take responsibility for their part in this issue. Meaning, the two boys, they are very spoiled. They're spoiled. And, that's something common. I'm so I'll get to that actually. So they're spoiled, and so I expressed to this parent, I was like, look, like, you say that here you express an issue, you express the problem. Cool. So obviously, naturally, when there's a problem, you would want to try and find a solution. But sometimes to find a solution, you need to peel away at the obstacles to that solution. And one of them is that you spoil them. I'm gonna sneeze. Woo! Okay. So one of them is that they spoiled them. And so I was saying, like, look, I understand why you spoil them, but if you truly want your two boys to, you know, do more, I suppose, with their life, to progress more, or in a, in a better direction, let's say, that is one of the things that you are gonna have to do something about, right? What that entails, the specifics of that, I'm in no place to be able to tell them that. But like, that's something that they need to discuss with the boys, and to also think about, and formulate some type of plan or strategy, let's say. Now, but the other issue is this too. you know I have to assume that this parent probably doesn't have a whole lot of, like, one-on-one, sincere, and composed discussions and conversations with the boys. I say that because this parent is, the way they conversate is not very I'll put it like this. This parent is not a very easy parent to conversate with, in terms of, like, being peaceful and sincere, and not allowing their emotions and their ego to take hold of the conversation. Now, they're not alone. Most of us have that problem to some extent. But what I'm saying is that I have to assume this parent has not had those conversations, or if they have had those conversations, they had it in such a way to where the two boys, probably were kind of not wanting to listen to the parent, because of the fact that they allowed their emotions and ego to grab hold of the conversation. Let's say, again, that's all assumption. I could be wrong. That's based off of what I understand about the parent. So the other thing that I thought was this. I was like, okay, well, these two boys, as far as I can tell, it seems to me that they haven't yet been given much of a reason. Again, I'm I don't know for sure, but it seems to me they haven't been given much of a reason to even want to progress. Now, part of that again is the whole spoiling issue, right? But I think it's deeper than that. Um, and I say that because, okay, so I was mentioning, I'm spoiled. I grew up spoiled. My mother spoiled me very much. Um, and I was blessed. I'm blessed to say that regardless of that, I turned out in a way where I guess I would say I don't come off as a spoiled child. And I say that because, a lot of spoiled kids, especially if you're a single child, which I am, you can tell. You can tell that they had it all, and that, there's certain ways and acts that they do that you're like, ah, yeah, you're a spoiled single child. We all know that, or we all know somebody, or whatever, right? Now, me, God bless, I stepped out of that spoilage, I guess you could say. Um, and I don't particularly like the fact that I love my mother. I love her very much, and I'm blessed to have her. I'm blessed that she loved me the way she did and all that. But I have expressed to her that it's not good that she is spoiling me and still trying to spoil me. It is not a good thing. And that's just who she, I just want to, she just is that way, for good or for worse, right? But I tell her, I'm like, that's not, don't do that with me. It isn't a good thing. I don't like it. I want to be able to you know, move forward, one, on my own, but also two, in a better manner than thinking that I can just have it all because that's how I was treated, right? Anyways, what I'm saying with that is this: in terms of the two boys, they were spoiled. However, they it seems to me they haven't been given much of a reason to progress. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if they've had conversations where, like, one of the things I would want to ask them is, "Hey, how far out into the future have you thought about?" Like, Like, and that's something I think is a very important question. Like, do you think only a year out into the future? Do you think 5 years out? Or do you think 10, 20, whatever years out into the future? And the reason I think that's an important question and why I would want to ask the two boys that is because depending on the answer, that I would be able to some extent gauge, I suppose, why they do or don't want to progress. You know what I mean? Because if they say, "Oh, not really," like I don't really care about the future, there's the answer, right? Like if they don't care about the future, why would anybody want to progress, right? Well, then from there, the conversation can be had about like, well, why do you feel that way? Like, why wouldn't you want to think about the future? Because one of the reasons that I have been able to not allow myself to be spoiled the way I could have been, I mean, I was, but again, not let that show in my ways, I guess. But one of the reasons is because I try to think far into the future. And one of the things that I talked about this before, but one of the things that makes me desire to be more and do more and progress is, the thought of having a family. And even if that doesn't come to be, just the thought of being able to serve people, right? Because if I progress, the better I can be in all aspects of my life, the better I'd be able to serve people. And that is something that drives me towards wanting to progress and be more. And so, I think that that's a conversation that if it hasn't been had with those two boys, or at least hasn't been had effectively potentially, that, should be had. And so progression and self-sabotage. Okay. So again, this is the part that I'm struggling with. I'm trying to figure out how to express effectively the importance of wanting to progress, right? Because that is important. We should all want to be more and be better, and it doesn't have to be a whole lot more, but just, move towards being better. And then again, sabotage, because, all progression has some level of sabotage. It doesn't necessarily need to be self sabotage. The world does what the world does, it hinders us, it causes us to falter and, backtrack, what have you. And so, okay, I guess here's how I'll sum it up. In terms of the progression aspect, right? Again, there needs to be, one of the main things I would say is that there needs to be some level of desire to move forward based on a future goal of sorts, right? And that's something that needs to be thought about or discussed, right? And so, okay, I'll leave it at that for now. And then in terms of sabotage, like, it's very interesting because, we'll go through it. I mentioned, I talked about briefly video games. Like, we'll go through it and, we'll be on a roll, we'll be on our stuff, but then something will happen that hinders us and stresses us out and causes us to feel some type of way. And then we self-sabotage, like we're progressing, we're doing good. And then when something gets in the way, when there's something that like causes us to feel some type of way, we'll do a thing that makes that progression go back even more. You know what I mean? Like before, if if I'm progressing on my stuff and then something would happen and I'd be stressed or something would cause me to feel some type of way, one of the things I would do is I would go to the bar. I would go get some drinks, play some pool, and have, enjoy my life. Now, again, that's not necessarily bad in and of itself, but that action, that act it doesn't actually help me in my progression. Again, I can make the argument that like, oh, I needed it to lay off some stress, blah 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 blah. But there are better things I could have done, you know, that would have helped, like not backtrack me as much, let's say. And also, for most people, I was one of them, is that when I do that one activity that backtracks me, oftentimes I'll keep doing that activity because it's like it feels good in the moment. And so, it's very frustrating. But I think ultimately there needs to be that discussion, whether it be with ourselves in our head or with somebody else, of like, why would you want to progress, right? Because if you want to progress, assuming you do, which hopefully you do, you should have a reasoning as to why that is. Hopefully it's a good one. Hopefully it's a selfless one, right? But there should be a reasoning nonetheless. But then again, the other part with that is once you start your progression, when things get tough, which they will, usually that starts by the world. The world makes it tough first. How can we keep ourselves from self-sabotaging? Like the world's already doing its part to keep us from getting to the goals. Why would we go ahead and add on to that? You know what I mean? Like it's very frustrating. Again, I'm guilty of that too. And that's also why I'm like, like what's the solution? And so ultimately, we need to, one, be able to call yourself out when you're self-sabotaging. Like don't make I try, and I'm pretty good at this, but again, I'm not perfect. And so I'm pretty good at, when I do self-sabotage, not telling myself, hey, it's okay, it's fine. Like no, don't do that shit. Or do and see how that plays out, right? But like, to me, it just, that doesn't seem like the best solution to the problem of your progression, of your progression being hindered, right? So that's the first thing. And then also too, it's just, again, like, with you being conscious of your self-sabotage, if that is what to happen, it's also being conscious afterwards, like, why am I even desiring to progress, right? And making sure that once you get that back in frame, right, pick up where you left off, right? And again, that can be easier said than done sometimes. Yes, that's facts. But if the why is important enough, there's no reason why it can be easier said than done. There's no reason why it can't be done, right? So anyways, yeah, that's the best I got. No, it's kind of, as most of my thoughts kind of are, hence these videos. But nonetheless, hopefully that made sense and was helpful to someone in some ways. So God bless.